The story begins with this young girl going to buy 2 salads with this guy here. He thanks her for her purchase and says he hopes she comes back soon. Here, the guy tells us that he killed someone when he was 15 and that it was the most euphoric moment of his life. He says it was a classmate he was in love with, and the price he paid was 20 years in prison. He says he spent all those years cursing his existence. He adds that 3 years after his release, the last thing his parents told him was that he should never have been born. He says he has the urge to chop beautiful women to pieces, and he gets more of that urge if he's in love with them. It's a desire that's almost impossible to suppress, and the only option he has is to live in solitude. Honestly, he wonders why he is like that. Although he says he's satisfied with the life he leads, that he'll continue living peacefully for the rest of his life, or at least. That's what he had in mind, since when leaving work, he finds a little girl in the rain. The guy is surprised and asks her if she's cold. The girl says yes, so he invites her in and lets her take a bath. The guy sees that the girl has many bruises on her body and wonders if she's been abused. He sighs, "Poor thing," and the girl speaks to him, saying she needs clothes. The guy gives her a shirt and apologizes that it's too big, saying all the clothes he has are his. The girl says not to worry and thanks him. He asks her what her name is. The girl's name is Alice. He tells her it's a very beautiful name, and she blushes. The guy's name is George, and he says he owns a grocery store. He asks her if she likes meat, and the girl happily says yes. George tells her she's lucky to wait a second. He brings her a plate with a piece of meat and tells her to blow on it before eating because it's hot. Alice is very surprised and happy. George says he likes children, that their presence helps him forget about his evil nature. He asks Alice how old she is. She says 8. George says he's 38. Alice, surprised, tells him he's a full-grown adult, 10 years older than her mom. George tells her she can sleep there for the night, but that she must return home tomorrow, since her mom must be worried. Alice says she's not. George tells her then her dad must be worried, and Alice says she doesn't have a dad. Alice says her mom always told her she should never have been born. George remembers that they always told him the same, so he tells Alice that it's not true, because he's really glad to have met her and thanks her for being born. Alice is very happy about those words, and George tells her she can stay as long as she wants. He thinks that this is how his new everyday life will begin. Changing scenes, George and Alice are at a clothing store. The lady welcomes them and asks George who the cute client is. He says she's his niece and that she'll be under his care for a while. He tells Alice to say hi. George tells the lady he's looking for clothes that will fit Alice. She says yes, to wait a moment. We see Alice trying on clothes while George thinks that instead of showing her his kind of love, he wants to try a new way to do it. The shop lady and George say she looks adorable and super cute. George says they'll buy everything Alice tried on. He says maybe the action is sincere coming from him, but even so, he knows it's abnormal. Alice also tries on a hairband. George says the flower on that band is called Iris, and that it sounds familiar to Alice. He ends by saying that Iris means love, or also, "You are my treasure." Alice throws herself to hug George while he pats her head, thinking that whatever the reason may be, he just wants to be a human being. The next day, George is working at his shop, thinking about what to make for dinner. He gets home, and Alice greets him. She tells him to look at the drawing she made for him. George is surprised and thanks her. Alice hugs him and tells him she loves him. George says he loves her too while wondering what this feeling is. He feels like he must protect Alice from all the sadness in this world. He wonders if this is the feeling they call love. Then he asks what she wants for dinner, and she says hamburger. They have dinner. Alice takes a bath, and while lying in bed, she asks if they can sleep together. He asks if she's sure. They sleep together, and George, for a moment, feels his murderous impulses toward Alice. Apparently, it was all a dream, but upon waking, he still has those impulses, saying some rather disturbing and worrying things. Morning comes, and George wakes Alice, tells her to get up and wash her face, and asks if she wants to go on a morning walk. She excitedly says yes. Here we see that George is actually taking her to the police. Alice tells him that when they get home, they should draw together. He says yes. Alice tells him that this time he has to draw her. George says okay, but that he's not very good at drawing. Alice says it doesn't matter, that it's a promise. George expresses what he truly thinks and says he's sorry, but she won't be going back with him. Then it starts raining. George says they should have brought an umbrella. Alice says she doesn't need one because she's not cold anymore, that even though it's raining, she feels super warm, because when she's with him, it's always warm. Suddenly, a voice is heard calling Alice. They turn, and it's a woman calling Alice again. She seems to know George. It's the woman who is buying something at the beginning of the chapter, and to our surprise, it's Alice's mom. The mom tells Alice she was looking for her, that she must come with her now. Alice says she doesn't want to. Her mom angrily yells at George, asking what he did to her daughter, calling him a pervert. Alice gets angry and tells her not to talk badly about George and yells that she hates her. Alice's mom, a bit surprised, takes a few steps back. George quickly explains everything that happened, that he found her in the rain and gave her shelter, but she immediately became attached to him, so he said she could stay as long as she wanted. He apologizes for making her worry and tells Alice she must go back with her mom. She's crying as she leaves with her while George thinks it's better this way, that he hopes Alice finds happiness. Later, we see that the mom throws Alice to the ground and starts scolding her, saying some really nasty things. Alice apologizes through tears, and her mom, who seems heartless, starts kicking her on the ground, scolding her for always doing the same. Then we see George come back and punch the mom hard, knocking her out. Then we see a small flashback of Alice with her mom, where we quickly realize she's completely insane. The woman wakes up and wonders where she is. We see that George has her kidnapped, chained in a room and, for some reason, also naked. The woman gets chills, understandably so. Just look at the crazy face George has. She starts screaming for him to let her go. George grabs her hand and then cuts off one of her fingers. The woman screams in pain while George is completely deranged, laughing. After that, George begins dismembering her without hesitation, saying he doesn't even know if he's happy or sad, that everything feels like a dream. Honestly, it's all very disturbing and I'll have to censor this because I don't want my friend YouTube to take down or restrict the video. After all this, we see George go to the police. When asked what's going on, he calmly and sadistically confesses that he killed someone. The police officer is just like us, shocked. George tells the whole lore of what happened. Later, a reporter appears giving the news of what happened. All the neighbors, including the clothing store lady, are very surprised and can't believe what happened, saying he seemed like such a good person. We see George already in prison watching a recap of all the crimes he committed, saying that this time they gave him the death penalty. He says the public nicknamed him the Butcher, since he's a killer who dismembers his victims. He remembers the look in Alice's eyes when she saw what happened, saying it was the look of someone whose family had been taken away. He apologizes and says they should never have met, though he says that with Alice was the first time he felt what warmth is, and that he's ready to die whenever. Then George asks the passing officer if he can bring him a pencil and paper. The officer asks what for, and he just says it's to pass the time. The officer brings them, and George draws a picture of Alice, saying that, after all, he had promised it. 10 years pass, and we see a young woman visiting what seems to be a museum. She sees a painting there. Then we see George sitting on his bed saying that tomorrow is the last day. Then a guard calls him saying he has a visitora woman named Alice. George is surprised and wonders if it's true, if he'll really be able to see her again. He says she probably holds a grudge. When they meet, we see Alice crying, telling him it's been a long time. George also cries and tells her she's grown and is very beautiful. He thanks her for visiting and says these 10 years, he hasn't stopped regretting what happened, that if only they had never met. Alice tells him that's nonsense, that she saw the drawing he made for her and it moved her so much she felt she had to tell him. She says many things have happened in her life, and she's had many hard moments, but even so, she's very happy to have met him, that he taught her what love is and thanks him for being born. George, upon hearing this, can't help but break down in tears, surely because he had always wanted to hear those words. Alice tells him she's very happy he's alive. George asks if she could tell him some happy memories she's had. Alice says yes, that she also wants to know more about him. George thinks he can't tell her that tomorrow he will die, so he says that thanks to her, he has learned the joy of drawing. Alice says she didn't do such a thing. Then the guard interrupts them saying time is up. Alice says goodbye, saying that next time she comes, she'll bring a drawing of him. George thanks her and says he's looking forward to it, to take care. While walking with the guard, he tells George it was a nice visit, wasn't it? George says yes and thanks him. The guard asks if there's anything he'd like to eat, and he says he'd like a hamburger. And that's it, friends. That's how this little story ends. While I was reading it to make this summary, I couldn't stop feeling that something really bad was going to happen. It was like a strange feeling of suspense. And although it did end up being really disturbing, I'm glad nothing happened to the girl and that even a relationship, although a bit twisted, turned into something beautiful. As always, if you enjoyed it, please give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the other summaries I have on the channel, like this one right here, where I talk about one of the saddest mangas I've ever read, and which is getting an anime adaptation this year. See you in the next video.